morning. I'm Izzy Greenberg. Today, we are joined by Meryl Gay from the Connecticut Early Childhood Alliance and Ava Bermudez Zimmerman from the Child Care for Connecticut's Future campaign. I'd like to start by thanking Sandra for providing interpretation for us this morning and remind our speakers to speak slowly enough for her to be able to get all the detail to folks. Remind our community that we can use the chat for communication with each other or for technical difficulties you might be having. But if you have questions for our panelists, please use the Q&A. You can use it in English or Spanish. Either one will be fine. So this morning, we are going to actually have Ava and Meryl doing the presentation, and it's going to be on Connecticut's narrow cost analysis. I am just going to turn it right over to them, and they are going to run you through a lot of detail on it. It's important and it's worth paying attention to. And as usual, we will record this and post it on the YouTube within 24 hours. That's also where the chat file and the Spanish audio file will also live. So if you're a Spanish speaker and you miss any of this, you can watch the video, but you can also listen to the Spanish audio file along with it if that's useful. At the end, we also, I believe, have Georgia Goldburn to do a little bit of conversation around some regs changes. So Meryl and Ava, I will turn it over to you. Thank you.
Okay, so today we're going to take a look at the narrow cost analysis and its connection to how providers are paid through Care for Kids. Let me let Ava do her piece, and then I'll get into the details.
Good morning, everyone. So I just wanted to make sure that people know what the narrow cost analysis is, right? So the narrow cost analysis goes into a pretty lengthy explanation as to what the cost of care and how that impacts providers and families when it comes to the market. Meryl will go into the federal side of things, but just wanting to go into the Connecticut and into the Connecticut narrow cost analysis and its impact. Let me share. Meryl, are you sharing the
slide deck?
Actual slide deck, or?
Yeah, I'll show you the slide deck, and if somebody could throw in the link to the narrow cost analysis so people can go find it and download it themselves for future reference, that'd be good.
Awesome. So what you'll be seeing. Awesome. Thank you, Izzy. Most people did get the link in the invitation for this meeting today. If you're wondering and you did have a chance to open it up and say, like, what is this? What am I looking at? There's a bunch of numbers. It's very specific information about how providers get paid in the state of Connecticut. The information was then researched and people who are creating policy and have a good understanding of how the child care marketplace works nationwide went in. They verified more or less what providers get paid in the state of Connecticut. Then they said, well, if we add more money to it in a scenario where providers are getting paid what they should get paid, what would that look like? And then they created these projections. The narrow cost analysis in the advocacy side is basically our best example of what providers in the future, in a reality where they did get paid, compensated what they should get paid, could get paid. I know there's like a lot of shoulda, woulda, couldas. But imagine what you're getting paid now, right? And many of you, if you're an owner operator or if you have staff, you really struggle to ensure that that payment is more than enough to pay your own bills, right? So imagine a reality where someone said, we know you work more than 40 hours. We understand that you have your credentials, you go to school, you take your CEUs, you take your classes. Most of you are very passionate about the quality of education that you're giving that child. And then someone says, well, because you take that time to study, because you work so many hours, because inflation in the United States is so high, you shouldn't be getting paid minimum wage. You should be getting paid more than that, much more than a dollar or two. So the narrow cost analysis is taking all those factors and putting it into an equation. They're saying, yes, your school, your background plays a factor in your pay. It also says you taking the time out to go back to school also should allow you to make more money. The amount of hours you put into this job also should make sure that you get paid more money. And then it's creating like this big pot. You know, if we're making a soup and we're putting some carrots, and you know, at the very beginning of making that soup, we thought it was just going to be noodles, and now we're adding some carrots, we're adding some celery, and at the end, we even got to put in some meat. So providers deserve to add meat into that soup, right? But right now we understand that you're not getting it, right? You're just in the pasta, you're just in the noodles. So we're hoping that the narrow cost analysis allows, because researchers made the effort to figure out how much the narrow cost analysis, how much you get paid, and the state of Connecticut is mandated to make sure that this research is done. We're hoping that it could be a vehicle to better advocate, to say, hey, providers, here is proof from the state of Connecticut, and providers do deserve to get paid more. So that's just an aerial overview of, you know, connecting what Meryl is going to do a deep dive into the work, but I'll pass it back to Meryl and then I'll go into advocacy.
Okay, let me share my screen here and let's see. Why is this not? Let's see if I can get to slideshow.
We can see it.
You can see the slideshow?
No,
Okay.
you go ahead and hit that, but I'm just saying your share is working.
Okay. So what we're going to talk about is Care for Kids payment rates and the narrow cost analysis. Let's see if I can get to it. Okay, so we've got a basic paradox in childcare, which is that parents are paying more than they can afford, and providers don't earn a living wage. And the connection between the two is that the revenue to pay you comes from what parents are paying, or if Care for Kids is paying part of that, what Care for Kids is paying. But the reality is that the low subsidy rates from Care for Kids exacerbate the problem. The current Care for Kids system attempts to address the first problem of that paradox, which is affordability for parents, but not particularly the second, which is fair compensation for providers. We went for 17 years with only one very small increase in the payment levels for providers. It wasn't until 2017, I think, that, or it's 2018, that the federal government sent the state a letter threatening to withhold some of their child care development block grant because we were paying providers such a low amount. But it was really the formation of the Family Child Care Union and bargaining for higher rates that started to increase the payment levels to providers. As long as Care for Kids payment rates are based on what parents can afford to pay, the market rates, rather than the cost of providing care, child care providers will always work for less than they deserve. And that's just the basic reality, that we have a broken market for childcare. Many of the people who need care can't afford to pay what it really costs if providers were going to get paid a decent living. So let's talk about the narrow cost analysis. Where did it come? What is it? Why was it done? What does it tell us? And how do we use it? So what is it? It is an attempt to determine the cost of providing care. It seeks to understand the primary drivers of that cost, and it models the cost of quality care. So why was it done? The federal government requires it. That's why it was done. Under the current law, the federal government doesn't have the power to tell states that they have to pay providers more. Their power in all of this comes from a block grant program. So in the Head Start program, the federal government has a lot of say as to how the program is run. But in a block grant program, the federal government says, here's a bunch of money and here are the basic guidelines on how to use it. And you have to submit a plan to us every 2 years to tell us how you're going to use it. So while they don't have the power to tell states how much they have to pay providers, they do have the power to require states to submit information about how poorly they're paying providers. So for years, that was based on the market rate. So every year or every 2 years, Care for Kids would do that market rate analysis, and then OEC would have to look at that market rate and tell the federal government, we're paying providers in southeastern Connecticut this percentile of the market. But that was all that had, they didn't have to raise anything. They just had to tell the federal government. So that was, because it was a percentile of market and it wasn't related to what it actually cost to provide care, it wasn't a particularly useful tool for us in advocating for more money. You know, if we went to legislators and said, well, you're only paying the 50th percentile of the market rate for infant toddler care in this area, a lot of legislators are confused by what's the difference between percentile and percentage. And it was all a bit confusing. This narrow cost analysis attempts to make this an easier argument. So let me move on to the next one. So what does it tell us? It tells us what the primary cost drivers are, and these won't be surprises to any of you. It's ratio and group size, and it's caregiver qualifications and therefore compensation. The narrow cost analysis also estimates the cost per child for different types of programs with different compensation schedule scenarios. So what we know from the analysis is that larger programs have some economies of scale. So their actual cost of providing care, if you're a program of 140 kids, is less per child than for a little program with, say, 36 kids. And the narrow cost analysis, if you go through it, will go through all of those scenarios and come up with cost estimates. So part of what they did was factor in some industry standards that the cost per child for the management and administration of the program is $390, that the occupancy cost, meaning the cost of rent and mortgage and insurance and utilities, is $34,000 and $558 per classroom. And then they have a figure for education and program expenses per child, and then expenses related to staff training and the consultants you're required to have. And then, of course, the big thing is the compensation levels. And that's based on, you know, if you're a program that says, we think it's really important to have extra staff in a classroom because we've got some children with some dysregulated behavior, well, that ratio of staff to children is going to impact your per child cost. So looking at taking all that into account, this is what they come up with for the cost per child in different scenarios. And so the scenario 1 is a small center. Scenario 2 is a medium center, and scenario 3 is a large center. This is looking at the cost of care in a childcare center using the current salaries in the workforce registry. So the workforce registry is what you had to put your salary information into when you were trying to get OEC stabilization grants, etc. It's in the past been primarily something that the state-funded programs needed to put information into. But this is what it's saying, the cost of care for an infant toddler, for a preschooler, and for school age. Now, many of you will be looking at that going, well, I'm not getting paid $25,746 for an infant and toddler. How does this work? Well, what that means is you're making do with the money that you've got on hand, which means you're probably not spending as much as these expense categories say is the industry standard. That you are, maybe scrimping on the per child expenses, or you've found a cheaper place to rent to run your program, so you're not paying that much per classroom. I would encourage all of you to carefully go through your profit and loss statement and figure out how much you're spending in each one of these categories, and how does your budget compare to this narrow cost analysis. Now, one of the things that they're really looking at here is trying to get people to think about what would it cost if we were paying staff on a compensation scale, which is similar to what public school staff get paid. And this is what their scenarios are on that cost per child. Now, I think all of us will say there are not many parents out there who could afford $35,000 plus for infant toddler care. No one's expecting that this narrow cost analysis is going to make parents pay for this. What we're trying to do is highlight the difference between what Care for Kids is paying and what's the actual cost of providing quality care. Quality care where you have experienced, well-educated staff who stay in this for the long haul because they're making a decent wage that enables them to take care of themselves and their family. So let's look at family child care home costs. This is what the cost model says is the true cost for family child care in scenario 9, that middle column. That's using the registry wages. Those registry wages are listed in the narrow cost analysis document that there should be a link to. And this is based on the assumption that was captured in the narrow cost analysis that family child care providers are on average working 68 hours a week and paying them at the rate that a child care, a teacher in a classroom would be paid in the registry, which, let me just pull up my thing here. What is that? Second here. So that's assuming under the registry wages that a lead teacher is getting paid $19.72 an hour, or about $41,000 a year. In scenario 9, this is saying if family child care providers were being paid that much at their hourly rate, the cost per child would be $18,500 for an infant. Well, for preschool, it's all the same amount in family child care. But and then here's the costs over here and on the right-hand column of if this were to go up to what public school teachers make. And so that's an increase up to $34.37 an hour. So this is a cost model. This is plugging it all into an equation and saying, if we were paying people this much money, what would it cost per child? Now, the next thing that the cost analysis does, that the federal government required for the first time this year, is to look at what's the difference between that calculated cost and what Care for Kids pays providers. And so this is looking at it on a weekly basis. If you look at the statewide average using the current salaries in the workforce registry, Care for Kids is paying $56.12 less per hour than the cost of providing care at the current wage averages. It's obviously much less at the preschool level. It's only $3.91 less per week. And for school age, it's $34.53 less per week. But we all know that Care for Kids doesn't pay everybody the same amount. The state is divided up into 6 different regions. So let's look at that. So here is the deficit, the difference between the cost of quality care and the regional payment levels. So you'll see over here on the far right, there are 3 categories where Care for Kids, oops, let me go back, is actually paying more than the calculated average. Those are in Fairfield County, where the costs of doing business are much higher. Rent is more. Because rent is more, you have to pay providers, you have to pay staff more in order for them to be able to live anywhere near where you have your center or are trying to run your family childcare business. So those are the only places where Care for Kids is actually paying more than what the statewide average of costs is supposed to be. Over here in Eastern Connecticut, in the second column from the left, you'll see that the infant toddler rate is $151 a week less than what the model says it should cost. Now, the cost of renting space is cheaper in Eastern Connecticut, but the minimum wage is the same. And the biggest driver in all of this is the cost of staff. So when you look at that category, that second column there, looking at the eastern part of the state, or you look over in the middle column in the Northwest, where you have the biggest deficits in the weekly payment rate, it's not surprising that those 2 areas are big childcare deserts, because it's hard to use the Care for Kids subsidy and be able to pay your bills. Now, how do we use this information to press for higher rates? The first thing is that all of you need to look carefully and see how your costs differ from what's used in the cost model and understand why. Understand my cost per child isn't that much because I'm not spending that much on program materials, or I've found rent cheaper than what they used in the cost model, or I am only paying my staff minimum wage, not what they put into the cost model. You can see all of that information about the costs in that relatively concise 13-page document that they have in that link. So the next, and the reason that you should look at it and understand the cost differences is because that will make you that much more confident talking to policymakers about why we need to have change. So what are the things, it's really important for you to understand what are the things you can't afford because of your current revenue. You know, my parents pay me this much, and that's this much less than what the cost model says it should cost. And because of that lack of revenue, I'm not able to spend as much on materials for the classroom, or I can't provide food for my kids, or any of the other things that you might be scrimping on because you don't have enough revenue. So finally, we need to use this document and the information that you learn about how your program compares to the model to educate legislators about the need to increase Care for Kids payment rates. I've already started talking to some of the Eastern Connecticut legislators about the fact that, you are a childcare desert here. There isn't enough care. And here's the reason why. Care for Kids is paying $151 a week less than it actually costs to provide care here. We need to fix this. So we can use this tool. Here is a document prepared by the Office of Early Childhood that points out the shortage in the payment levels. And that's a really powerful tool that we can use. So there's the link to the document if you haven't seen it yet. And if you have questions about how to use it, or if you want some help thinking about organizing a meeting with a legislator, there's how you can reach me. And I think Ava's going to pick up and talk some more.
I have a couple of questions before we do.
Yep.
I am getting a lot of notes that people need the English link, but the one I shared is in English. And so I'm wondering if people are looking for something different. So I don't, maybe you guys can, oh, I see the presentation link, not the cost analysis. Are you comfortable with me sharing this presentation?
Absolutely.
Great.
Yep.
I will share that. Apologies, everyone. I was looking at the wrong document. John is asking, actually, I'll do it, Meryl. You don't have to worry about it. John is asking, the numbers are per hour. Is that correct?
Let me go back to the select. The numbers, the $151, that's per week. The hourly rate that providers, the cost model uses an hourly rate. Let me just stop my share because I think I'm sharing something that looks pretty weird here. Why can't I get to?
Oh, Meryl, it actually.
There we go.
Okay, never mind.
Okay, I stopped the share. So the registry rates are for floaters and assistant teachers. The assumption is $15.72. For lead teachers, it's $19.72. The admin assistant is in at $15.69. The assistant director is at $21.07, and a director at $29.79 as the current registry wage averages. But on an annual basis, that's about a little over, well, $32,700 for floaters and assistant teachers, and $41,000 and change for lead teachers. That's what the registry is saying the current averages are. The compensation scale that OEC was required to prepare by the legislature that compared, that would make rates more equivalent to what public school teachers earn based on the same credentials, so that this is assuming a head teacher in a classroom with a bachelor's degree, that would be at $38 an hour, or more like 79. No, let me get to the right place. $34 an hour. So more like $71,000 a year instead of $41,000 a year. And assistant teachers and floaters at $24.91 an hour, more like $51,000. Those numbers sound enormously high right now because the revenue coming into childcare is so small and based on what parents can afford. This is the only way we're going to get to those compensation levels is if there is more public subsidy making up the difference. No one expects that parents are going to be able to pay that much to be able to make it possible for providers to earn what we really should be earning.
We have Stephanie has her hand up.
Yep.
Are you, ready to take Stephanie? You are go ahead. You're welcome to join. She also asked a question, so it's possible that Bryce was an accident. But Stephanie, if you're there, you're welcome to join. If not, I'll ask your question from the Q&A. Okay, let's just do the one from the Q&A then. Care for Kids just sent a letter that they received ARPA money, which goes towards providers. The letter said the statement in January will say what each provider has received from ARPA. It's not explained well. Does this mean providers are getting extra money, or does that mean that a portion of the regular payments are ARPA grant money and therefore won't be taxable? Why is this coming in if it doesn't affect the actual money coming in? And I'll add, how is this related to like the way they're projecting, that, how does this relate?
I think we're going to have to get someone from Care for Kids to answer that question. So, the narrow cost analysis is really trying to look at what's the difference between what we're currently paying and what a reasonable cost model says it should cost to provide care. We all know that everybody in childcare is scrimping and saving and trying to make ends meet. And that probably means that you're not spending as much in some of those categories as the model suggests you should, because you simply don't have the money to do it. We want to use this tool to press for higher rates from Care for Kids so that it's the public subsidy system isn't dragging everything else down. And we eventually want to get more people able to use the public subsidy system, Care for Kids, so that there's more money in the system, and that will make it possible for you to run your businesses more effectively and be able to pay staff better.
Thank you. And then someone asked, and I think you basically alluded to this, but these numbers are if Care for Kids pays more. We know there's a number of many families who are not receiving Care for Kids subsidy. And this person saying we couldn't increase tuition only for certain families. And I think the answer is right. This is the public funding, right?
So one of the things that changed in the federal rule that governs Care for Kids is a clarification that you can indeed have Care for Kids pay more than the market rate, more than you charge your other families, so that this could be lifting things instead of depressing your revenue. Our goal is to get this so that the subsidy system covers many more families and that the subsidy system pays more per child. Those are our two goals here. That's how we get more revenue into the early care world so that you can pay your staff better and you can, have a nice center or a nice, have your program up to the standards you want it to be.
Right. Are we ready to move on to the next section of this, or is there more from your section, Meryl?
No, I think that pretty much covers it for me. I'm happy to answer any questions. If people have questions about the narrow cost analysis, I know it's pretty nerdy here. Not everybody's excited by pages of numbers as I am, but I do encourage all of you to get your profit and loss statements out and dig into this, compare your numbers to the numbers used in the model and understand where the differences are. And think about, I'm only spending $1,100 per child on educational program costs. What would it be like if I could spend what they project in here. You know, how could my program be different if I had that much more money? You know, if I could pay my staff this much, would I be able to get people to stay longer and get their degrees? Well, probably you could. So those are the things that we need you to understand your numbers so that as you talk to legislators, you can really make that case because you know those numbers inside. Okay.
Right,
I'm just reading Stephanie's.
related.
Yeah.
Okay, great. Thank you, Meryl.
Yep.
All right, Ava, you're up.
Yeah. Thank you, Meryl. Always super informative. He is our policy guru when it comes to childcare, very knowledgeable. Connecting it to Meryl's comment on talking to legislators, I just wanted to let everyone know some next steps that not only the Early Childhood Alliance, but also the Childcare for Connecticut's Future and other organizations around the state that are doing advocacy on this issue are gearing up for session. So you should be on the lookout, right, on the EC listserv, or if you are a member of the Childcare for Connecticut's Future Coalition, or if you are a member of the Connecticut Early Childhood Alliance, the group that Meryl runs, he's a director of. Some emails coming up this fall inviting you for some trainings. And a lot of these trainings have to do with how to talk to a legislator, how to make sure you understand the legislative process. I know on these calls, on Early Care Connection calls, we often have partners that ask you to join and testify during legislative hearings. Many of you have, but it's not over just because you testify once or twice or even 3 times. Every year, there are always legislative bills that are being promoted. Many of them are there to help the childcare system and help you. If you're wondering, what does that have to do with the narrow cost analysis? Again, a reminder that because this study is done, because it has real numbers highlighting what you should get paid, even though this is in the framework of state subsidies, it is very helpful information to let those politicians know, you know what? Everyone in the childcare system should be getting paid this or more. It should be a baseline rather than imagining a system where everyone gets paid, just minimum wage. We should imagine a system where everyone gets paid above that or more. And the more money pumped into the system, the more money that is pumped into subsidies like Care for Kids, programs like Head Start, programs like school readiness, when those numbers go up, when there is more state funding allowing you to get paid more, the more possibility that programs have for raising the payment for their employees all around. So that's why this conversation matters. That's why it's very important that we keep a close eye on when these numbers go up and what's happening to them. And then, like Meryl said, advocating to legislators to make sure that your payment goes up as well and that you have at least additional help from the state of Connecticut to allow those numbers to go up. So next steps are keep an eye out on some invitations that are coming on the EC listserv for some awesome trainings that are going to be happening October, November. Then another round, most likely in January, when session starts. And that's going to be your foot in the door to make sure that you're advocating for yourself and for the families that you represent. And then in those trainings, we're going to talk about how to testify, how to share your story. Other events that are happening this fall as well. We are setting up conversations in the Childcare for Connecticut's Future has on October 19th a conversation with legislator Kate Farrar. She was a fantastic state representative advocating for early care and education last session. She's one of our champions. So she's going to have a nice discussion with us in West Hartford. That information will soon be out. After we have that conversation with Representative Kate Farrar, We're going to be doing some door knocks in the Hartford area to talk to some parents, talk to some family members about why childcare matters, and to make sure that their legislators are paying attention to childcare as well. We're going to do the same in November as well, doing some door knocks and some legislative conversations. So keep an eye out for that and be part of the conversation. And then we're also, Childcare for Connecticut's Future is also having a film screening about the difficulties of childcare on November 14th, as well as November 16th. And then on the November 14th film screening, Clarissa's Battle is a documentary where we are screening. That will be followed by a roundtable conversation. Izzy, I know you renamed it.
Sorry, panel discussion.
Panel discussion. Thank you. Panel discussion afterwards with legislators and experts talking about why childcare should be publicly funded or should have some additional public funding to make it happen. So be on the lookout for those invites, be part of the conversation. It is, I know it's not easy that you have a long work day, my goodness, and you're exhausted and you just want to make dinner and you're like a thing on a Saturday, a thing on a Thursday. But these are, rare opportunities we have to talk to legislators out of their element, outside of the Capitol, talk to them like human beings and make them understand that, this system really, really does need help. So I'll pass it back to you, Izzy.
All right, great. Thank you. There's a bunch of questions in here about times and people wanting more detail. That stuff will be forthcoming. Meryl, maybe one of your advocacy workshops overlaps with an OEC CDC meeting potentially. Let's see.
I think we just changed that. So actually, if you could call on Vanessa.
Yeah, absolutely. All right, Vanessa, you're up.
Hey, everybody, can you hear me?
Yes.
Awesome. So I'm Vanessa Hawk. I am the advocacy and membership manager at the Alliance. We are having our 2024 Advocacy Academy focused on Advocacy 101. As Ava kind of went over a little bit already, ours is going to be a 3-day series of courses. Day 1 is going to be covering who handles what in state government, and then using your why, figuring out your why and using your story to advocate and make more attention grabbing arguments for your cause to the legislators that you're speaking to. Day 2 is going to be how a bill becomes a law, the simple version. Just kind of what they teach in high school. And then the second half of that session is going to be how it actually becomes a law, what they don't teach you in your high school civics class. We're going to be having an advocate speaking on that day who has experience working in the legislature and on the advocacy side. So she's got some really great insight that we're excited to share with everyone. And then day 3 is going to be a field trip to the state capitol. We're going to be taking you around the legislative office building and to the Capitol building itself, showing you this is where you're allowed to stand. This is where the bathrooms are. This is where you can get some food or coffee, taking you around the building and making sure that you know the ropes, because you don't want to be going there for the first time when you're going to testify at a hearing. That's a little bit nerve-wracking. So we're going to make sure everyone's comfortable in that setting ahead of time. And then the second part of that we're very excited about is a session on relationship building in politics and how relationships in politics are developed and why they're important, both as a constituent and as an advocate. All of those topics and dates can be found on our website. It's cteca.org/advocacy academy, and I'll put it in the link, or I'll put a link in the chat. Members will receive free enrollments to this. We are just getting onboarded to a new system to manage our events and our memberships. It looks like it might finally be done, so I will be probably getting those membership enrollment links out soon. people who are not yet members of the Alliance can register for a fee, or you can join the membership of the Alliance and you can get the tuition included. Like I said, all the details are going to be in that link that I will post in the chat. And if you have any questions, please don't hesitate to reach out. I'll put my email in the chat as well.
And I do want to point out that that's not 3 full days. The first
yeah.
2 sessions are on Zoom and they're about an hour and a half. So it's just intended to be done so that, you know, we're trying to make this as accessible as possible. And everything is recorded so that if you do the first one and then the second one, you know, somebody's out sick and you can't come to the Zoom meeting, you can watch the recording and be able to do it. And we are making a number of spaces in each training available for each member organization. The membership for the Alliance is relatively modest, $150 a year for single site organizations, $300 a year for multi-site programs, $500 for small statewide organizations, and $1,000 for large statewide organizations. Each one of those organizations gets a number of slots to send folks to the training. So we are looking to have a good training this fall and train lots of folks to be ready to advocate in the next session.
Great. Thank you, Meryl. Thank you, Vanessa. I am going to move on. I think are we done with narrow cost analysis? We're good to move on from that now. Yeah. Okay. And obviously all those other updates, flyers will be coming soon for all of that. You can see the link to the Advocacy Academy. Georgia Goldburn, you are up. Regs change, and I know the conversation has been hot and heavy in the ECE listserv. I've been trying to keep up, but I'm sure you're here to help us understand it better. Thank you so much and welcome.
Thank you. I don't know that I can change. I don't see the option to change my photo, even though I really like that picture, but I don't know that I can see the video, my ability to do video.
Do you want me to turn your video on? Is that what you need?
Yeah, I'd like people to see.
Yes, I would love that. Give me one quick second. I'm going to, you'll time out for a second. You'll be right back.
Sure.
Join as a panelist. Great. Okay, we've got you now. Thank you so much.
Still trying to figure out this Zoom thing. All right. First of all,
Can't
thank
see
you
it,
guys for allowing me to come up and just speak on this issue. I'm late to join in this conversation about ratio in the listserv, but I've been an advocate for changing the ratio for quite a while, and I want people to understand my perspective. And in order to understand my perspective, I really need to share what I do and how this work connects to what I do. So I am the co-founder of Circle, and Circle is a shared service alliance that supports providers who serve primarily children of color or who themselves are children or people of color. And we created this alliance to create better outcomes for our Black and Brown children in the state. And we do that by recognizing what Meryl has just highlighted with the narrow cost analysis, is that it is super expensive to deliver care and education to children with the model that we have. And what Meryl has pointed out in a narrow cost analysis is that larger providers have the ability to deliver this care at a lot lower cost. And a big part of that, their ability to do that, is economies of scale. And so what Circle does is it builds in those economies of scale for much smaller providers. We have about 38 providers, 22 of whom are family daycare providers. And a part of the work that we do is we look at how can we drive down the cost for providers and increase the revenue for providers. We meet every other Saturday and we support providers to think about their business, to recognize what the numbers are, and basically to make a plan for the future shift and shape and landscape in childcare. Izzy, if you don't mind, or Tammy, if you don't mind dropping our email website address to folks so people can understand, so I don't have to go through the whole spiel.
Sounds good.
A big part of what we do is drive down cost, increase revenue. And we do that by looking at all of the different ways that we can drive down costs and increase revenue. One of the ways that we have determined to drive costs down is around the ratio. And we have been advocating for a ratio change, not so that we can have a race to the bottom, because we also recognize, or I've also recognized, is raising wages and low ratios are not going to be the only factor in this work that is going to attract and keep staff in your program. Currently, Hope's wages are aligned to the OEC compensation scale, right? We took that major step to do that. We want to pay our teachers what they're worth, and we want to pay our teachers in line with the public school. We also have really low ratios in our program, and that is also aided by the fact that we have a workforce training program. But we recognize that the conditions also have to change. The working conditions also have to change. And so we need the ratios to change to give programs the flexibility that they need, not to stress teachers out at the beginning of the day, and children, by the way, at the beginning of the day and at the end of the day. And we also need to ensure that we are not stressing programs out by having them pay teachers time and a half to stay beyond the time that they are working in their childcare center setting. A teacher who has to work 10 hours with a 1 hour or 10 hours because a parent is running late or a teacher is running late, that teacher is not going to stay if you're paying them more money. They can go other places and get paid more money. The working conditions have to be better. The ratio change in Connecticut will not result in the majority of centers being able to serve more children. What I have heard from many providers across the state, and the providers that I've spoken to across the state, is that their toddler classrooms are really built only for 8 children. I will disclose our toddler classrooms are not built just for 8 children. We can absolutely accommodate 2 additional children in our toddler room, but the majority of providers will not be able to benefit from this ratio change. But what we are trying to do is to recognize a truth, and that is that our center-based programs are uniquely charged and uniquely regulated in a way that no other program in the state of Connecticut or the entire country is regulated. So center-based providers with a 4-to-1 ratio for toddlers have a boulder strapped on their back and an anchor around their legs. And we are being asked to twist our teachers into pretzel to maintain something that family childcare providers have already proven for the state of Connecticut. You can care for toddlers in a higher ratio. Family childcare providers are doing that honorably every single day, right? Other center-based providers across the nation are doing that honorably every single day. Connecticut center-based providers should not be the only one in the entire nation and the entire state that is strapped with or saddled with a regulation that makes it the working conditions really very hard for children and for families. In my program, I can take, this is in September, and I have toddlers that are sitting on my waiting list that I cannot take off of my waiting list. I am one of those programs that can change with the ratio change can bring new children in. And like every single provider across the state that I've spoken to, their vision for their business is for their business to thrive and for it to grow. Yes, we are here to make money. Nobody is here working for nothing except for except for providers, and especially family childcare providers. But every single person is here in this business, not because of money, but because of the love of the work that we're trying to do. And we have been saying to folks, we are struggling under some of these burden and lack of funding, and people are asking us to ascribe to an ideal that nobody else is being asked to abide by. At the same time, we are not going to get the type of funding that's needed right away to ensure that the working conditions for our staff is better. For my program, I've calculated if I'm able to take in 2 additional students, that will help me to actually hire a full-time teacher that can act as a floater, that can be in my program, so I don't have to battle with my staff when they're sick and I'm fighting them to come into work because I don't have any other choice to maintain ratio. I've spoken to programs that are saying that they are being cited by OEC when OEC comes in the morning and a teacher is running late. And that's the day that OEC comes in, and you have that parent that comes in and you've got that one extra child, and OEC is basically saying to to a provider, tell the parents that they cannot drop off, send that child home. Or if that provider decides to keep the child and operate outside of compliance, not because they're bad actors, but your teacher is on the way, she's 10, 15 minutes away, but that would be the day that OEC walks in at that 8:30 time and you're out of ratio. I've heard these stories from providers. I've heard stories that teachers want to go home. They can't because parents are running late. We are asking for this regulatory change because it eases some of the burden at the beginning and the end of the day, those major transition times when parents are struggling, or when programs are struggling to maintain ratio to remain in compliance. Let's be clear, this ratio change is about providers who are trying to operate honorably in compliance with the OEC regulations. The providers who don't care about maintaining ratios, maintaining regulation, it doesn't matter what the ratio is. They're just going to do what they're going to do. But we cannot continue to encumber and burden providers in this work that are trying to do the best to deliver the best quality care for their children and families by not creating this ease, that this ease in the regulation that only Connecticut, let me say this again, only Connecticut childcare centers have this regulation. Only Connecticut childcare centers. Family childcare providers don't. Youth camp providers don't have this strict regulation, and no other center-based program across the nation has this regulation. We are not advocating for a race to the bottom. We are advocating, one, to ease the financial burden for payroll on providers. We know that these things happen and it creates issues for providers when they're paying their staff time and a half. It creates disruptions in the morning and in the afternoon when we're trying to regroup children. That's not good for children. And it also eases the work condition for providers, for folks, for teachers, that want to go home at the end of the day. This work is hard and they're tired and they have their children and families that they have to take care of. And when a parent is running late and we are having to go to our staff and say, stay like an extra half an hour or an extra hour for one child, that creates a very toxic work environment for our providers. And teachers are just going to be like, it doesn't matter what you're paying us. We are seeking better working conditions, right? So those are some of the things that we're trying to address. We need this change. Circle will be advocating for this change. And yes, this will also create opportunities in the future for providers who, by the way, and a part of our program analysis that we do with our circle providers is that there is not going to be a mixed delivery system in Connecticut. And let me tell you, I know Beth is, Commissioner Bai is committed to that vision, but market and political forces are not going to center preschool programs in center-based programs. I'm sorry, it's just not. Right? When the private schools and the public schools and the charter schools see the water spigot turn on to serve children between 0 to 5, they are going to enter into this space. And so we are not going to serve a lot of preschoolers going forward. We are going to be serving infants and toddler program. And what is the condition in which we want to serve infants and toddlers in Connecticut? We have an opportunity right now to determine what that condition is going to be. Because one of the things I'm absolutely certain about is this ratio is going to change. Whether it changes today, it changes next week, it changes tomorrow. Market forces is going to change it. Political force is going to change it. Our governor is not going to allow Connecticut to be the most inhospitable state for childcare business investments. So this ratio is going to change. The opportunity to change it to a 5-to-1 ratio allows us, the providers, to drive the conversation and maintain some still level of quality. 5-to-1 will still be a higher standard than what NIAC is even advocating. But when market forces come in, they're not going to be advocating for a 5-to-1. So right now we have the opportunity to create some easing for providers, to create some easing on payroll budgets, to create a 5-to-1 ratio that we will have proof of concept that this is a ratio that can still create profitability and create better working conditions for providers so that those very same community-based providers can be around to benefit from the increased funding that's coming in and will still be the driver of the conversations of quality and care and not corporate dollars or corporate investments that when they come in, their priority is not simply going to be the children and their care and education. Their priority is also going to be profit. And right now we have to create some easing to shore up our providers so that they can be around to benefit from what we think will be significant investments in early care and education. I am not advocating for a race to the bottom, ladies and gentlemen. I am not even fighting this ratio battle. This is a battle that's already predetermined. What I'm fighting for is for center-based, community-based mom and pop providers to have a fighting chance in a very hostile environment and to be able to create the conditions for our providers so that when the influx of investment comes in, we will still be around to be beneficiaries and we will still be the primary providers of care and education. Circle believes that children will do better when they're being served in programs that are mom and pop, led by people that are from that community. And we are concerned that if we cripple our mom and pop community-based providers to chase an ideal that is sure to come down, then we are going to, in Connecticut, be left with mostly corporate or very large-scale providers where we as advocates will not have any influence over them. And so this is why I am trying to advocate for the change. I've met with so many providers over the years, and in talking to them, I've heard the sacrifices that they're making. I'm a provider. I am making the same sacrifice. I trust my providers to do the right thing. I know in meeting with these providers that they're not here just for money. Otherwise, we would be doing something else. We are here because we genuinely love the children and the families that we're serving. And we're simply asking for a change, for people to advocate for some easing of policy so we can do a better job. We are not trying to just make money and and warehouse children. That's not what we're here to do. Otherwise, we would have been out of this game a long time ago. I trust that providers will operate in the same manner as I do in my program to deliver quality. And if we do not support them, we will definitely, the chickens are going to come home to roost, but it is the children that are going to pay coming down the line when we lose these really valued community-based mom and pop programs. And that is all that I have to say. And I am open for any questions.
Well, Georgia, I hope you can see all of the claps and hearts you're getting.
I can't, but because I'm not
there's
on
a
the
lot of
screen.
them drifting up
Oh,
the
there
screen.
is?
Yeah.
Okay, I'm seeing it now.
Yeah, maybe you'll see them in the recording if you go back, just to feel the love. There are a lot of comments. There's no questions for you. There's a lot of comments though, around how they fund classrooms, mixed age classrooms. That'll be complicated. Will children be safe? Parents should be charged so that people can be compensated if they're late. A worry that owners are going to do workarounds to save, to take in more money for them while working conditions and pay remain the same for the teachers. So, a lot of comments here, a lot of food for thought for sure.
And let me just say, because there is it's this undercurrent of you have all of these bad actors in childcare. And, one of the beauty of this call, and I will tell you, it reduces the isolation that we have. Because I think when I talk to a lot of programs, I think a lot of folks think I'm doing really well in my program, but there may be other folks that are not. And I want to say to this group, I have met with hundreds of providers, the ones who are doing the right thing and the ones that are doing the wrong things. And the ones that are doing the wrong things, a lot of times they're doing it because they don't have a lot of choices, right? They have to make money and they are making some bad choices, but those ones come to us when they want to make different choices. The ones that are doing the wrong things, they don't care about any advice that I give them. They go out and they do whatever it is that they're going to do. But what I've been really proud of through my Circle network and through this network is meeting all of the providers that are out there that are genuinely trying to do the right thing. And I also look at data, and the data backs it up. I spend a whole lot of time reading the OEC's data. I'm on their website probably more than they're on their website, and I read a lot of their data. The data backs up that Connecticut is filled with providers that are aspiring to create a quality program. And let's just take this from a business lens, right? It is illogical to believe that people who have invested their life saving and their life work into creating a business would not basically do the right thing for their business. Operating illegally in the childcare industry will basically destroy your reputation in the community. And we're a small community. We know who the bad actors are. And that gets pretty spread around. And so again, from a business lens, your goal, because this is what parents choose childcare basically on, is safety. Now, is everybody doing the right thing? No. But there are limitations that providers have because there are limitations in resources. You have seen the narrow cost analysis. It's expensive. All we're asking for is just some easing. We would still be above what NIAC is recommending for ratios for toddlers. And we will have proof of concept, which the family childcare providers have already given to us. We will have proof of concept that center-based programs can serve children at a higher rate and make money and drive the cost of care down without jeopardizing the safety of children. I trust the providers who are in this work when there is no money to be made, who are in this work out of love and commitment to the early care and education system. I trust them to make good and right decisions for their children. So I am not off the school where, oh, you've got all these bad providers that are going to make bad choices, right? I believe that my providers, the providers I've spoken to, the providers I've gotten to know over the years, they are going to continue to make those good and right choices for their children, for their business, with or without this ratio change. Right now, we have the power to determine that the ratio change will be a 5-to-1 ratio and not a 6-to-1 ratio or an 8-to-1 ratio. Let's put this in place. Shore up business, create better working conditions for providers, create some greater access for parents, because yes, there will be programs like Hope that will be able to do this. But this will also, the biggest benefit of this program is that it creates a better working condition for providers. And let me tell you, I am sure that this ratio is going to change. That's not even something I'm even asking people to come and to advocate for. But I think we need to say in a unified voice that this is something that is going to be beneficial for not just children, but also providers and for teachers that are delivering this work. Will there be bad actors? Yes. And we have to root them out. And the way that we root them out is to give them more support, give them more investments, give them more resources to do better. And the ones who are not interested in being better, we need to shut them down. But we have to trust people that's doing this work. We're adults. We're not kids. We're business people. We are business people that are operating in the most difficult climate that there is, and we're killing it.
In a broken market.
In a broken marketplace, and we're killing it. So let me tell you, I trust my people that they are going to do the right thing with or without this ratio change. But I want them to operate in Connecticut in the best environment, and I want the best for our children. I do not want market forces down the line determining that Connecticut should have a 6-to-1 ratio. If we have a 5-to-1 ratio, provide some easing and demonstrate proof that we can operate at a slightly higher ratio and be profitable, then we can preserve lower ratios for children where everybody else possibly, there's some people that's going to be a race to the bottom. But let me tell you, we killed it during the pandemic in Connecticut. We will kill it with a 5-to-1 ratio. And this is what I know from these women and men that I've met over the years. So I trust them, and I'm asking for this group, for everybody who's sending up the signs, make sure that when Circle sends out some notices for you guys to send to legislators, and we're hoping to have a change petition, and we may not have the time to do it, but we want people to lift up their voices. We want providers to lift up their voices and reject the idea that somehow we, as Connecticut-based, center-based providers, are incapable or uninterested in managing a 5-to-1 ratio for center-based for toddlers.
Well, thanks, Georgia. I appreciate you being here today. It is great to share voices, and I know yours is a powerful one. Absolutely. If there are other folks in this community who ever have, ideas for topics for, presentations, want to come on to share a perspective, please get in touch with us, because that's one thing, as Meryl said, for us nerdy folks to be telling you guys about what's coming down the pike, but it's certainly another for you to hear from each other. And that is, and has always been, the purpose of these calls, is education and community building. So, so thank you, Georgia, for being here. You get more hearts and claps than anybody I think ever has. Go watch the video, just pat yourself a little bit on the back.
I appreciate it.
For that, at least it's a milestone of sorts. And there's a lot in here in the chat. So our voices are always available to be lifted. So that's a nice thing Miss Mia said. Thank you, Miss
All
Mia.
right, thank you.
All right, that's it for today, guys. We went a little bit over our usual, but it was important, and glad to have done it. We've got some stuff on down the pike. I don't have a specific topic for next week. We're always trying to do the thing that's most relevant, but that means that it's a little bit by the seat of the pants. So we've got some good topics coming in the next month, and we'll have a calendar to share out with folks soon. Thank you again to Sandra for providing interpretation this morning, and for Meryl and Ava sharing all that information about the narrow cost analysis. I hope folks can take the time to read that analysis, and also to read both the presentation in English and in Spanish, whichever you prefer. And we will see you all next week. Thank you so much, and have a great week.